we've talked on the YouTube channel about the Fear franchise, guys, and I gotta say that this is a franchise that I have absolutely enjoyed over, the course of the years that this franchise was kind of coming out, and I thought that it was a terrifying experience overall, especially the first two. The third one, not so much, had some pretty terrifying elements to it, but I thought the first games, this of course being First Encounter Assault Recon, is what Fear stands for, and I thought that the first two games in this franchise were something really special, absolutely terrifying experiences, but adding terror to a first-person shooter was something that I really was not accustomed to whatsoever, and so especially during that time, in the time period that this franchise, had come out. But then, of course, in Fear 3, kind of took a little bit of a misstep, so to speak, in the Fear franchise, even though I didn't think it was a terrible, addition to the franchise. I just thought that, fans and even critics alike didn't like it as much as the first two. Well, obviously, guys, we haven't seen a continuation in this franchise, and I think it's really unfortunate because there is something there in the Fear franchise, in my personal opinion. Not only adding terror to a first-person shooter, but having elements, guys, of a great story, potentials with, of course, Fear Online, which was a, multiplayer experiences and such. I would love to see them give this another try, that being like just the Fear franchise as a whole. So what I want to go over, guys, is in Fear 4, even though this isn't something that's been confirmed, there's been rumblings and rumors about a Fear 4, but nothing's been confirmed at this point, but I want to give the things, that being everything that we want in this game when and if it ever comes out. So let's talk about it. So guys, when I say everything that we want, I'm mainly talking about myself here because I'll be the one person, talking about it. But I want to hear your guys' thoughts in the comment section below about what are the things that you guys want to see in a Fear 4. Now look, as far as my personal opinion, I'd love to see just a direct continuation off of Fear 3. I'd also, personally, wouldn't mind seeing almost like an origin story more so, kind of going back before the Fear, the very first Fear game came out. I wouldn't mind getting more of an origin story. I wouldn't mind, kind of getting kind of seeing things like from a different perspective, so to speak, because the first three games pretty much were going, back to back to back essentially. But I thought that it's important, guys, when you're looking at these franchises as a whole, the biggest thing is kind of going through these stories and, kind of putting the pieces together. There's some mystery to these games as well as, some, just absolute terror in my opinion. But I think that going back to where it kind of all started and kind of learning some of those origins would give it somewhat of a soft reboot type of feel to the Fear franchise, kind of reintroducing people to the Fear franchise. One of the big things I'd also like to see, guys, would be the first three Fear games kind of remastered for the Xbox Series X as well as the PlayStation 5. I think that would be really cool to have a remastered version, kind of really reintroduce everything to the world. Similar to what they're doing with the Crysis series, that being Crytek. They're, putting the Crysis remastered, that being the first three games, and remastering it. And I think that Fear could really do well with that as well if they were to, remaster this franchise and release it to the world. And then following that, come out with Fear 4. And I think an origin story or maybe just a direct continuation off of Fear 3 would maybe be a good idea. But I think some of the things that didn't work for Fear was Fear Online was one thing. I think that Fear had something going for it, and I feel partially, the developers decided to go in different directions that, kind of maybe remove some of the terror aspects to make it more of a shooter instead of, like a horror shooter. And so I think that what they need to do is kind of go back to what made this series so great. It was a terrifying game, and I think having multiplayer is absolutely something that you need to do. Having multiple ways to connect with the franchise is very important. And so one of the big things for me is not only getting more of an origin story of Fear and really understanding how this group was created, right? The First Encounter Assault Recon, really understanding that, this organization, and then even understanding everything else about it, right? Everything else from just the other characters, right? Even if you introduce new characters, understanding origins, I think, is really important, in my opinion. Even though you start to learn, you start learning some of the origins of these games, but at the same time, I think that they just did not. It didn't really connect well, I felt, in Fear 3. And so, in my opinion, a soft reboot might be a really good idea. Having multiplayer experiences so that after you're done with the main story, you have multiplayer experiences to play with your friends, or just against other people out there. It's a shooter, so I think certainly this would be a pretty good franchise and series if you added online elements and you did it in a really good way. On top of that, I think having just co-op modes as well. Having a bunch of co-op modes, I think, is really important, guys, when you're talking about, playing with your friends. And because a lot of times it's a lot better to play with other people, especially when you're talking about the horror franchise. Sometimes it's fun to play with multiple people. Sometimes it's fun to go through a single player story by yourself. But co-op missions, whether that being, you're going up against waves of enemies in the in Fear, and like whatever the modes might be, going up against waves of enemies, or if you're just doing like co-op missions, I think would be really awesome for something like Fear. I think there's a lot that they could do with it, and I think that there was something special in this franchise, and it's just unfortunate that it didn't land well with everyone, especially like the third game. But obviously there was something there because they made 3 games here, guys. So there's definitely something there. I think it's just coming to the conclusion of what is going to bring people back to the franchise, and I think it would start with a remaster of the first 3 games, and then of course continuing that with Fear 4. Other than that though, guys, there's so much that we could talk about regarding the Fear franchise from a story perspective. What direction could they go in? Like I said, an origin story, I mean, you could continue right where Fear 3 left off. It's hard to say really what would be the best thing. You could even say, you go on to another part of the world or something, and have totally new characters, and somehow, some way, things are being tied into the Fear franchise in the main, narrative of the first 3 Fear games, and it maybe ties in at the end of the game or something. It's hard to say, but I think there's definitely something here, and it deserves to exist in the world of gaming and in the first-person shooter space, in my perspective, because it was very, very unique for what it was, and I'd love to see this come back. But we as a fan base, as a community, have to be that voice to get the developers to bring the series back, at least from the grave or from an indefinite hiatus, which is where it seems to be at this point. I'd love to see this series come back. It's going to be up to us to pretty much bring it back, and hopefully we'll get a remaster of the first 3 games at least, and then moving forward from there, if it sells well, which I think it may, you would get a Fear 4. But let me know what you guys want in a Fear 4. At this point in time, guys, what is it that you guys want to see? Do you guys want to see just a Fear 4, story? Would you want to see more of an origin story somewhere else on the planet? Would you want to see, a direct continuation, a soft reboot? Do you want to see multiplayer modes? Do you want to see co-op modes? Do you want to see modes where you're going up against like waves of enemies, kind of like Gears of War's Horde mode? Or what do you guys want to see? Let me know in the comment section below. And for more Fear 4 content and videos, stay here with Zero TV.